Welcome to the AI and Your Homeschool podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Manos, and I'm so glad you're here. Today we're talking about AI, homeschooling, and how parents can thoughtfully prepare their children for a world of rapidly changing technology. I'm honored to welcome Jessica Frierson to the podcast today. Jessica is a homeschool graduate and a mother of 10 who has homeschooled her children from the beginning. She has 7 graduates and 3 still at home. She is a writer, a graphic designer, and a graphic design professor, and she also serves as the media director for North Carolinians for Home Education. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
Oh, this is going to be a fun conversation. I became acquainted with you through the Thrive conference that NCHE hosts, and I saw that you were teaching on AI and how to prepare teens. And so I'm so thankful that you're willing to be on the podcast today, and I'm really looking forward to chatting with you and learning from you some of the things that you have unique insights. And so before we jump into the AI conversation, tell us a little bit about yourself and your homeschool journey and that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So my homeschool journey actually began as a 17-year-old high school student and going into 11th grade. My mom, single mom with 7 children, I was the oldest, decided she was going to homeschool her children. This was back, or I guess it was the late 80s, early 90s. And by the time she started me, it was 1991. And I honestly thought she just ruined my life to pull me out of school and homeschool me. 2 weeks in, at 17, I said, I will homeschool my children one day. It was that much of an impact of me to see the
Wow.
benefits of homeschooling at 17, 2 weeks in. And so I ended up graduating a year early. When my peers, my former classmates, were having their senior year in high school, I was managing a jewelry store, gaining a lot of world experience, business experience. I married about a year, well, I guess at that point it was about 3 years later, and we started our family. We started out in South Carolina, and when our son reached the age of compulsory education in South Carolina, I said, I don't think I want to do this here. It's a great state, but I know that North Carolina, I know how it works there, and I think I prefer that. So we moved up to North Carolina and began homeschooling, though really, you homeschool begins at birth, right? But officially, in 2001, we opened our homeschool, and we've been doing it ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. We homeschooled our girls all the way through high school, and what a rich experience it was. I love that the journey that you came on, that you got the vision for homeschooling from your own experience. Okay, so tell us a little bit. Your first intentional interaction with AI came when you enrolled in college at the age of 49. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yes, well, so I went from working to being a wife and a stay-at-home mom, and then after 28 years, it we needed for me to work, and I still wanted to be home. So I took the graphic design course, got my degree, and my plan was to work from home, which is what I do for the most part. But before I graduated, they asked me to come back and teach graphic design. And what I really loved as a homeschool mom was the way they put that was with all of your years of teaching experience. And I think you can relate to that as a homeschool
Mm,
mom, that like we don't always get a lot of validation. Homeschooling, I believe it's getting more appreciation for its value. But having given you my journey, I'm coming from the days where it was looked at like that's not legit, right? But to have
right.
college professors, the administrators say like all your teaching experience, and what that is, that's homeschooling, right? So I went as a student in graphic
Yeah.
design, and that's where, as you put it very well, my first intentional use, because we all are using AI every day, we just aren't realizing it. My first intentional use was in the classroom. My reaction was, I remember the first time we were told to use it, I resisted. I'm not going to do that. That's cheating. I'll do it myself. And then I realized the time that I was putting in something that wasn't critical for me to do all the legwork myself and my classmates over here are finished and moved on to the next thing, I realized, oh, you know what? Maybe there's a right way to use this. And so I guess that was my introduction to the intentional use of it.
You're right. We do use it every day. Even I just taught a workshop at the Arizona convention a couple weeks ago and had people raise their hands, and the number of them that said they wouldn't use AI or weren't using
Yes,
AI. And I thought, you really already are. It's in everything we do now, email, Canva. I
yes,
mean, it doesn't matter whatever program you're using, your
that's right.
Netflix account, your navigation on your phone, it all has AI built into it.
It does. It's all
Okay,
around
so
us.
yeah, it does. It's amazing. So then you were invited to return as a professor, right?
Right.
After you got your degree. How did your perspective on AI change when you moved from being a student to teaching and evaluating students?
Okay. So that's where, as an instructor, I'm seeing all of this work the students are turning in and realize that there are skills that you have to have as a graphic designer to excel, right? Then there's skills that you have to be able to utilize, but you can use tools to help you with those things. And some students are great designers, but they cannot spell. Okay, and I use this as an example. You cannot misspell words as a graphic designer. You just can't. Okay, so does that mean if you don't spell well, you can't be a graphic designer? But all the other skills are there, right? So that's where I realized the value in using something such as Grammarly or even ChatGPT or Claude, something like that, where the students would, it's a requirement. You must check before you turn this in, you must run it through some sort of a platform to check the grammar. And I realized that it helped students who could be very, very effective graphic designers if they use those tools. And I began to understand that that really isn't any different than, for example, using a ruler. Okay, would anybody have a problem with using a ruler to measure the poster that you just printed? You need to cut it down to size? Or, do you really think that we have to
Yeah.
eyeball it and be precise with that, 16 and 1/8 inch? We have to eyeball that, or can we use a tool like a ruler? And so I
Right.
began to look at it from that perspective. It's another tool that can be used.
What a great perspective on that. We are using all sorts of tools, aren't we, that help us in different ways.
Right.
Okay, so in your workshop at the Thrive Conference, you talked about the difference between using AI as a tool and using it
Mm-hmm.
as a shortcut. So, how would you define that distinction?
Okay, what I would say is when we use a shortcut, we aren't thinking. Okay, when we use a tool, we're using something else to help us think better, more effectively. Um, for example, if we will take calculators, if we allow our young children in our homeschool to use a calculator when they're first learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, they're never going to learn to think through that process of the math, right? But if when they get down
Yeah.
the road and they're doing algebra 2 and trig and calculus and even earlier than that, if we make them sit there and do that long division on every problem, they've already mastered that skill, right? And it's going to take them forever to
Sure.
get to that point, but they could just use that tool. It's not a shortcut at that point. It's not replacing their thinking processes, but it's enabling them to take another step in that thinking process to do the new thing they're doing.
So important. Okay, so one of the things that you talk about is that homeschooling is about formation. It's not about information, it's not about performance. How should that shape the way that parents think about AI?
That's a great question. I think it's possibly the most important question to think about with this. Here's an example that I gave when I spoke at the conference on AI is formation is about character. It's about foundational principles. Information is what's layered on that. So one of the questions with using AI, one of the concerns is ethics and morality. Okay. And so if your child is using AI to cheat, I mean, that's, a very strong possibility for them to use it for as an instructor at the college. Even though we require the use of AI in certain projects, there's very clear guidelines and there's things that no, you do not use it for this. That would be cheating, right? So how we discern and draw guidelines between those is based on information versus formation. And that all comes down to character. So an example is I had one child in my homeschool that he just wanted to cheat. He wanted a shortcut for every assignment we gave him. And we have teacher books, every homeschool mom probably does, and you have the answers in it. And we had to keep finding hiding places for those. We ran out of hiding places. And we got to the point where we felt, here's your assignment, here's the teacher book. Like, if you're going to learn this or not, it's up to you. I can't find another place to hide it. The problem wasn't there with the teacher book, right? The solutions manual. Right. The problem was in the heart. Okay? Yep. And it's going to be the same thing with AI. It's a formation of character that we need to focus on. We have to teach them to understand when you cheat, you're cheating yourself. We have to teach them about integrity, doing what's right when nobody knows. Maybe I won't know that you did this paper with ChatGPT, but you've robbed yourself of a skill you need to learn. You're hurting yourself in the long run. So I think that's what it's about, is the character that we are helping to form, not the information we are trying to get them to learn and to memorize.
Right. It's one of the things that I talk a lot about in preparing our kids for the world that's ahead of them is that base of knowledge, knowing history, science, the Bible, how to think, how to research, because that's how you're going to successfully engage with technology. Otherwise, you won't know, is it true? Is it, is this complete misinformation and made up? So those are some of those skills that we can give our kids that are so important.
Yes.
One of the things that you talk about is AI should not replace the struggle involved in learning. So talk a little bit about why that struggle is so important. And then what do students lose when that help comes too quickly?
Right. So learning actually comes through the struggle. A struggle is actually a very important part of that process of comprehending information, not just accumulating information, but comprehending it. When we are thinking through something and there's an effort involved in understanding it and comprehending it, working through it, a struggle that happens, the neurons in our brain are put to work and they're firing and they're forming synapses in a stronger way. And that's where learning happens. So it's like learning is the destination. Struggle is what gets us there. If we leave that out, where did we arrive? What was our destination? Some information that isn't really in here and is definitely not in here, right? Yeah. So we may have gotten somewhere, but it wasn't really where we wanted to go. The struggle is what gets us there.
That's so important. And it's so much more gratifying. I think I teach a lot about hands-on learning and how important it is to not just read and answer questions. That's a good skill too, but how much more you retain when you actually are engaging with the information through multiple senses and different, modes and methods and things. And so I think it's really important, but also it's so gratifying. If you watch somebody build something, you watched a demonstration, but if you build it yourself, you've gained a skill. And I think there is something that builds our confidence. So I love that. I think that struggle is so important for us as grownups too, not just for our kids.
It never stops. And we remember things that we have struggled to achieve or to accomplish. We remember those more, don't we?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's like, reading information or even an output from ChatGPT or Claude. You didn't really learn it if you just read something that was spit out to you. But if you had to do some research and read a book and have a conversation, how much more that information becomes part of your knowledge base. So that's so helpful. Okay, so You see AI from the perspective of a homeschool parent, a college professor, and also a working designer. So, as education and the workplace continue to change, what practical skills do you think our children need the most?
Well, there's a lot of things that AI, even as it grows, will never replace. And those are the skills that I think it's important for us to make sure our children are really solid in. And those are, for the most part, they're soft skills, things like empathy, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, conflict resolution. Those are things that ChatGPT, Claude, and whatever else comes up out there, Gemini, they cannot replace those things, right? Then there's also the more concrete skills like reading literacy, math literacy, comprehension, and being able to apply those basic educational skills. You're not going to succeed in the workplace if you can't do those basic things. You aren't going to know how to apply the things you've used in whatever AI platform you're using if you don't know the foundational things. An example of this is when I, as a student, we learned just enough HTML and CSS that we could put together a basic, very, very basic website completely with coding. Very basic, I want to emphasize. Now, as media director in CHE, I'm responsible for the website. And so I was putting together one of the pages. The images on it would not, they were just coming out huge, like the picture, and there's supposed to be a bunch of them, but one picture is taking up like the entire page, no matter what I did. I used ChatGPT and Claude. I went back and forth between the two to get the code that I needed to put in there, on the back side of the site to fix it. It took me quite a few hours to do, but here's the thing. I had to know enough about those to even know how to word a prompt and how to do what they gave me, what the output was. If I hadn't known those foundational skills of coding, I would never have been able to do what the AI was telling me to do. So you can apply that in any field, but also you can apply it to any educational endeavor that we're doing with our children. There's a certain level of foundational skills that have to be solid to even be able to effectively use AI.
That is really helpful to be reminded that the skills we gain actually prepare us for engaging wisely. Claude is probably my favorite tool, but I do the same thing. I will often take things back and forth, like, can you improve this?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to know how to ask good questions. And part of that
Yeah.
comes from doing a lot of research and asking a lot of good questions and having knowledge, at least a foundation of knowledge.
Yes.
That I love the example too. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so thinking about teenagers, before teens begin engaging with AI, what foundational academic and thinking skills should they already be developing? And maybe you've covered part of this, but I think there's a little bit further we could go with it.
Yes. Well, that's true. We have, but we do want to go deeper as they reach those teenage years. Those things that we should already be teaching them, even if AI isn't in the picture: ethics and problem solving and discernment, teaching them how to assess information that is in front of them for its validity. That's very, very important. You know, we live in a screen centered world. Our teenagers today have grown up in a world that's internet based, right? They don't even know life without having cell phones and internet and now AI. They don't even know a world without that. Information can be it can be overwhelming. There's information overload, so we need to teach them how to step back and take breaks from screens, from technology. That's a very important part of our mental health. And so we need to teach them that. And we need to not just say it, but do it, demonstrate it for them. That's a struggle for me
Yeah.
because everything I do with my work is on a screen almost. And so,
Yeah.
my kids kind of tease me, oh, mom, the screenager, because I'm sitting there on my phone. I have to monitor all of the social media for 3 different businesses. I'm on here all the time. I have to demonstrate to them, like, okay, now it's time to turn the phone over, push it away, even
Yeah.
though it's my work. But then taking that information when we are on the screen and discerning who is behind this, who is saying this, what is their motive, what is the source, what's the source behind the source. And I think it's very important, something that we teach our kids in history. A lot of us as homeschoolers, we are very focused on primary sources. So if we want to study, say, the American Civil War, we want to look back at primary sources, things that were written by people who were there living through that time as it was unfolding. That's far more valuable, right, than reading what someone today looking back assesses, right? So when you want to teach
Yeah.
them, go to those primary sources. So I think that's a skill before they start using AI, that we teach them to do that in the information that they're seeing right now. So maybe it's something about, it could be a health issue, it could be a historical issue, current events. Okay, who's saying this? Where are they getting their information? Let's follow this back to the source. And so one of the things that's important for them to learn once they've learned that is applying that, when they are using, Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever they're using, is, where did this information come from that it's giving you? And so teaching them
Yeah, that's
those
so good.
skills of discernment, problem solving, asking questions about things and not just taking everything at face value. And then, of course, things like creativity. I think one of the things that's really important is teenagers, they're finding their voice. They're discovering who they are, right? And so if
Yeah.
everything that they're outputting has come from AI, they're not developing who they are and their own voice. And so I think that's something really important for parents to think about, is guiding their child
Yeah.
into discovering themselves and who God made them to be, that unique individual that is not just regurgitating from AI. And so if they
Yeah,
skip that,
absolutely.
they're not going to be able to reach their potential of who they themselves can be.
Yes. Well, and God has created each one of us individually with gifts that He's placed in us. And it's what a gift as a homeschool parent. I always like to look at it like we're unfolding the gifts in our kids. And if we
Yes.
let them bypass the things we've talked about, the struggles, the research, the learning, we are shortchanging them in being fully who God created them to be.
Mhm.
And so I love all of those things. I also want to say I love what you mentioned about the mental health aspect, the putting down the screens. We cannot underscore enough the value of things like family game night. No
Yeah.
screens, board games, you learn strategy, communication skills. Like,
Mhm.
don't diminish the things that may seem trivial or frivolous that are actually building some of these really important skills.
That's so true. And even things like, for example, last night I had a lot of work that I needed to do, and it was tugging on me. Oh, I need to do this. Do you need to do this? And my 10-year-old walked through. He's looking a bit morose, and I just closed that laptop. I said, "Hey, let's go sit out on the bench outside." And we sat out there. It was about 8:15. The frogs were chirping. Everything's quiet all around us, and you can just hear that. And we just it was just a moment of just observe the world around us and just connect. I want to say on a deep level, not that we were having a deep conversation, but those deep connections occur only in those quiet moments. And so I think that's very important for our personal mental health and for our family relationships.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What a moment of, we just need to be present in spite of the things that are demanding our attention. And our kids are busy. Our teenagers are busy people. Our young adults
Mhm.
are busy. But that face to face or side by side, just time to be, is a gift we cannot overlook.
Mhm. And I love the way you put that. Just time to be. Just be and
Yes.
end it right there. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So important. Okay. So, how should families think about integrity, authorship, and disclosure when a student is using AI for things like brainstorming, organization, editing, and feedback?
So I think that starts with the family, the parents having conversations about some guidelines. Here's what you can use it for. Here's what you can't. And that may vary depending on what the subject is, what the assignment is. I would think that it probably would. And then I think, making clear that here's what you can use it for this assignment. Here's how I want you to develop this. And then making sure that there's always steps along the way, checkpoints that, okay, here's where you did your part on your own. Here's where you used AI. Here's where you came back to your part again. And then making sure that they don't take ownership or authorship of what was created by the AI platform. That they learn the importance of full disclosure of, hey, I generated this list from here, and then here's where I elaborated on it in my own words. And just teaching them that value. And I think, one way that we can help them to see that is just giving them examples from real world of, how would you think if you saw this and you knew that a person was the one who came up with this versus this is what AI came up with. And interesting thing I am noticing, I get a lot of teenagers and then young adults there at the college. I'm also, raising a bunch of teenagers and young adults. And then I'm involved with our youth at our church. So I'm around teenagers a lot. One of the things that I've noticed just in the last few months is very curious to me is it's just, they're very against AI. I will hear them say like, oh, that's AI. Like it's unappealing to them. They don't value something. And I have to say, I really love that. There was something that I was designing for our youth group, a little Bible study booklet, devotional booklet. And the cover for it, I had used some clip art for, I think is what I had done. And I was asking some opinions and they're like, oh no, that just looks too AI. Don't use that one. And it's like, okay, thank you. I mean, I
Wow.
appreciate that. I'm glad that they are valuing the difference in a human being creating something on their own versus just a computer generating it. So I think that's something positive that I'm seeing, and I think that's important for for parents as they are developing those guidelines. Is we can use that as how do you feel if this was you knowing how it was created. Okay, so take that feeling and put that in yourself of what you're going to output. Do you feel good about presenting this in this way? And
Yeah.
taking ownership for what you did and full disclosure for what you didn't do but you used.
That's really good. What's so fascinating is that you're not the first person that has said that about young adults and
Mm-hmm.
even some older teens being like, we don't want anything to do with this. And it's so
Yes.
fascinating because it would seem the opposite. I would assume
Yes.
that young adults would be all into technology and I
Exactly.
think what's because it's so pervasive, I think that people, especially young adults, are valuing
Mm-hmm.
human things, real
Mm-hmm.
things, relational things, human created things. And so
Yes,
it's an interesting dichotomy in this world that we live in where they
it
are
is.
digital natives, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So fascinating. Okay, well, my final question for you is what encouragement would you give to parents who maybe feel behind or unsure about how to guide their children in this area? You know, I have grandchildren that are almost 8 and 11, and they are growing
Mm-hmm.
up in a world where employers are expecting you to have AI skills.
Mm-hmm.
Their future looks like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is a new world we're living in, even though AI isn't particularly new, it's new in its use and day to day kind of thing. And so, how do you help parents kind of overcome that? One, it's so overwhelming because there's so much. Where do I
Mm-hmm.
even or how do they, if they're feeling unsure, I don't know how to prepare my kids. Do you have any
Right.
thoughts about that?
Maybe I should tell them to listen to the Nancy Manos show. but but seriously, it's programs like this that I think they can utilize to help them navigate what is really constantly changing waters in this world of AI. Another thing is and that just goes along with informing yourself, educating yourself on it. And I think, interestingly enough, you can use AI to help you learn
Yeah.
how to do that. You can go open up whatever platform it is you want to use and say, this is what I want to help my child to do. Give me some guidelines, in how to teach them this, and or show me how to do this so that I can teach them. That's going to help them. And then, of course, as we always say, go back over it, look over it for yourself, and say, nah, I don't think I want to do it that way. Be discerning, and in what it gives you to use. But I think that's one use of it, just educating yourself and understand that you're never going to really fully understand it. It's constantly changing. What we say about how it works today is going to be different next week. And so just go into understanding you're not going to catch up. There is no such thing as catching up with AI. You're not
Nope.
going to catch up. So just take baby steps and introduce yourself to that world of AI. Do it slowly, and as you feel comfortable with it. And it's not as hard as it looks. It's not. And there's are a lot of great resources like your show and other shows out there. There's plenty of things on YouTube. You can watch videos that'll help you. And I think the biggest thing is prayer, and just ask God
Yes.
to give you guidance and discernment, and just to help you to understand. I mean, as a mom, there's not a day I don't go that goes by that I don't say, like, I don't know how to do this for anything, not just AI, but
Right.
any and everything, right? So it just falls into that everything else does, that you just ask God to help you and to guide you and help your brain to understand this crazy thing that we never really thought we would experience. This, we're talking about Star Trek and Jetsons, right? And it's here today. That can be like a
Yes.
really intimidating thing,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be.
Yes, it's true. I I love that encouragement. We have learned hard things. Like how many of us had to relearn algebra to teach our children or,
Yes.
whatever. Like as homeschool moms, we have learned a lot in teaching our
Mm-hmm.
children. And I also like the reminder that the tool itself can give you direction. If you're brand new to using AI and you don't know where to start,
Mm-hmm.
ask, what would the
Yes.
first three things that I could do, or
Yes.
think about something you're already doing. I have fixed my printer. I have done some troubleshooting on InDesign when it wouldn't print. And I was like, what is going on? I
Yes.
couldn't figure it out myself. And ChatGPT helped me solve a problem. It's been a
Yes.
good
Right.
sourdough coach.
Right.
There's so many ways that, but I think we need to rely on the fact that we have already had success in
Mm-hmm.
doing things that are new and unfamiliar to us, and we can be confident because we can look back and go, I did that hard thing. I learned something new. This is just another level of
So
that.
true.
And I think we need to be reminded that God is not surprised by this technology, and we are alive for such a time as this. So, in as we close, do you have any final advice or thoughts that you want to share?
Well, I think I would just say that pretty much what you just said, that this is, just another thing. It's just one more thing, and there's always going to be new things that we learn, even if we're not homeschool moms and dads. But it is in this world of homeschooling. Every child that you do is different. Just like we taught, maybe your first child was, math came really easily to them, and the next one it seemed like they would never get it, and you persevered and you worked through and you found what worked for that child. Everyone is going to be different. Every home is going to be different. What your family decides to do with AI is going to look different than what every other family's AI will, just like your homeschool looks different than theirs. And so, just do what you feel at peace about. Take it that far, and don't be discouraged. Don't let yourself feel overwhelmed by it, because like you said, you have been here before. It just wasn't AI, it was another thing that you didn't know how to do. We just persevere, and we, keep on finding what works best for our family, and then figuring out how to make that work.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a really helpful conversation, and I'm so grateful for the practical experience and the perspective that you've shared with us. So, where can people find you?
Well, you can reach me at nche.com. You can email me at media@nche.com. And then my personal website, which was my student project, jsfdesignstudios.com.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you, truly, Jessica. This has been an amazing conversation. And I want to thank our listeners for joining us on the AI and Your Homeschool podcast. I invite you to subscribe. And if this episode was encouraging to you, please share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time.